It's Saturday, 14th of January, and you're tuned into the Portable Power Podcast. Each Saturday, we're going to be taking 5 Game Boy games in the order they were released, from the humble beginnings of 1989, and living the evolution of Nintendo's wonderful handheld consoles. This week, we're playing Tetris, Shanghai, Boxxle, Bugs Bunny Crazy Castle, and Motocross Maniacs. Let's start the show.
They said it wasn't humanly possible, but now you can have all the power and excitement of Nintendo right in the palm of your hand. Introducing Game Boy. It's portable, it's in stereo, and its games are interchangeable. Plus, Game Boy comes with the outrageous new game, Tetris. And for head-to-head competition, use the revolutionary video link and blow your opponent away. Game Boy, only from Nintendo. Now you're playing with power, portable power.
Tetris DMG-TR, developed by Bulletproof Software and published by Nintendo. If there's anything that defines the word quintessential, it's Tetris for the Game Boy. I wouldn't for a second recommend that people only play one Game Boy title, but if for some bizarre reason you were only able to get hold of one, then make it this one. In the same way that North Americans in the mid to late 80s referred to playing video games as playing Nintendo, the Game Boy was often dubbed the Tetris machine, and not without reason. Tetris was not originally designed for Game Boy, of course. There's a very interesting and controversial history behind this game's journey to the West, with licensing issues featuring Atari and Nintendo, as well as 2 separate developers creating NES ports. All of this happened before 1989. By the time the Game Boy was ready to hit the shelves in North America, Tetris was firmly under the stewardship of Hank Rogers' Bulletproof Software and Nintendo, and was the perfect title, by intuition or fluke, who cares, to pack in with the system. It cannot be understated how important this game was to the success of the Game Boy, and still is to its undying legacy. This is the definitive version of one of the most well-designed, addictive, enduring, hell, one of the best video games of all time. No less than creator Alexei Pajitnov has stated that it's by far his favourite version, as it most closely captured the essence of his original design. It's true that any other iteration, past or present, is inevitably compared to this one, and they all fall short, bar none. For those of you reading a book about the Game Boy who don't know what Tetris is, it's the essence of simplicity. It's the original falling block puzzle game, often imitated, never improved upon. Puzzle pieces, or tetrominos, arranged in 7 configurations of 4 blocks, hence tetra, fall from the top of the screen down onto a board 10 spaces wide by 20 high. The aim is to align horizontal rows of 10 blocks, which will then clear away, dropping the rest down. If any part of the construction reaches the top, it's game over. Up to 4 rows can be removed at any one time, garnering much bigger points. After a certain amount have been cleared, the level and speed of descent increases. There's also a Mode B game, which, rather than having an empty grid, features a random assortment of blocks that you need to clear out, following the same rules. Tetris isn't strictly a puzzle game, as there are no set patterns to winning, nor is anything predetermined. No, it's arguably the most elegant and pure example of a strategy game, whereby the balance between risk and reward holds the key to the most massive scores. You need to calculate how high you can build those towers, saving that single solitary column for the blessed straight piece, while weighing up the chance that you might not get it at all. The frantic speed of the higher levels means good hand-eye coordination is a powerful weapon, as one slight wrong move and catastrophe can quickly befall you. The game really excels too with the link cable, one of the few legitimate reasons to use it in my opinion. By clearing lines, you force more blocks to drop onto your opponent's screen, making for an incredibly frantic duel. You control either Mario or Luigi, because who else, right? And can play multiple round competitions. The music is super catchy, with a choice of Russian-style folk and classical. The sound effects are simple and well made. Visually, you can't ask for more. What originally was famous for being a colour game was transposed so well to a monochrome that the game wasn't hindered in the slightest. The simplest of fixes to a problem that would plague many titles that came after it. The game sold 35 million copies, which is astronomical to say the least. 4 times the amount sold for the NES. Indeed, from 1989 until the release of Wii Sports in 2006, Tetris was topped only by Super Mario Bros. For the NES in terms of the highest-selling single console title of all time. This is an outrageous statistic for a monochrome game on a handheld that was decidedly primitive, even next to other handhelds of the time. Similar to how Wii Sports opened up video games to people who ordinarily didn't care, Tetris was embraced by all demographics, from old people to commuting bankers. This didn't suffer from the stigma of video game, it was just a game, a challenging alternative to the daily crossword. An even more pleasing statistic for Game Boy fans is that until the PS2 came along, the Game Boy was the highest selling console, not just handheld, but any video game system, of all time. More than the NES, Super NES, Mega Drive, PlayStation, you name it. It's no stretch at all to say that Tetris was a huge factor in this success, possibly the biggest. It quickly became the defining game for the system, and never lost that accolade. What a perfect fit. At the start of this book, as we are right now, I can't definitively state this, but I'd wager there's no game more of a soulmate to the Game Boy. I'd absolutely love to see it if such a thing exists, but I don't think it possibly can. Shanghai, DMG-SHJ, developed and published by HAL Laboratory. Following the Japan-only launch title release of the traditional rules mahjong game Yakuman, we have a version of mahjong solitaire. Shanghai is much more accessible to non-Japanese speakers, however, and did see a North American release. The game uses the standard mahjong tile set, but rather than playing against an opponent here, the tiles are stacked in a predetermined pattern. Matching pairs of tiles can then be removed, provided that at least one vertical side can be touched, and the tile is not underneath another, with the aim to remove all pairs of tiles. Accompanying the small selection of frankly cliched Chinese music, we have some pretty bland graphics. The mahjong tiles are clear enough, so no problem there. You can change the nice looking traditional designs for a letter-based one if you want. If you clear the board, you get a picture of a dragon blinking at you, and that's it. I'm not sure what I was expecting exactly, but it's a little underwhelming. The title screen has a lady with the sharpest nose, frowning and blinking at some water lilies for some reason. There's only one tile layout, which is a shame. It doesn't encourage you to play for more than one round. But hey, if you want to play Mahjong Solitaire, this'll do. For what HAL accomplished later on the Game Boy, we can forgive them this one. Boxxle DMG-SO, developed by Atelier Double and Thinking Rabbit, and published by FCI Incorporated and Pony Canyon in Japan. 1981 saw the birth of Thinking Rabbit's crown jewel, Sokoban, a puzzle game in which the player pushes but never pulls crates around a labyrinthine warehouse onto predetermined tiles for some reason. Despite this concept having its heyday long before the Game Boy's release, the little system was perfect for such puzzlers, and so we have a legitimate descendant, Boxxle. The reason given this time is that some sweaty, grinning proponent of inefficient manual labour needs to perform this assumedly low-paid makework to buy a present for his true love. A pallet truck would have been easier, but there'd not be much of a game. Anyway, whatever the tacked-on story might be, What we have here is a rather addictive and frankly pure evil brain ache of a game. This game feels a little like a frame of snooker, carefully planning out which box to move without blocking others in order to clear the whole lot. Trial and error doesn't help much. You really need to plan your moves and figure out what can't be moved where, as well as what can. There's no time limit, so you can decipher the layout for as long as it takes. You can see how many steps it takes you to complete a level too, although these aren't saved anywhere, so I don't know if there's much purpose to it. Yes, there are a lot of levels, but this game marked one of the first instances with a password save system on the Game Boy. There's also a rudimentary level editor, but you won't use it. Graphically, there's very little to look at, and what's there is confused. Like some crazy MC Escher lithograph, when moving horizontally, your character is side-on, but vertically, you get an overhead. How hard would it have been to choose one or the other? If inconsistent there, unfortunately the levels are too consistent. There's absolutely no variation in the tile design at all. This is a basic game, there are no frills. It doesn't look great, and audibly it wears very thin very quickly. Unless you manage to get to the end, there's one song all the way through, and you will hate it after about a minute and a half. There is a very early toe-in-the-water attempt at a synthesized voice. When you beat a level, the guy exclaims, "Yeah!" while doing the night fever thing. You'll see what I mean. It's pure cheese, but for what the game is trying to be, I don't think this matters too much. Such a simple game concept is put to great use over the course of more than 100 levels, with an excellently measured difficulty curve. The game gets really hard towards the end, leaving you confused not only at how to beat the stage, but how they were even designed in the first place. If you like to punish yourself with devilishly sadistic puzzles, this is great. Just turn the sound off. Bugs Bunny Crazy Castle DMG-BB, developed by Kotobuki Systems and published by Kemco. A game with a strange history is Bugs Bunny Crazy Castle. Kemco originally wanted to create a Famicom game based on the film Who Framed Roger Rabbit. The problem arose when wanting to export it to the NES. There was already an LJN game based on this film, so Kemco bought the rights to use some of the Looney Tunes characters instead. By the time the Game Boy title was due to be released, the rights for Roger Rabbit had expired, leaving Kemco scratching around for a gimmick for their game. The opportunity to use Mickey Mouse proved too lucrative to turn down. So, in Japan, the game Mickey Mouse was released in 1989. This was based on the original Famicom NES titles, so to avoid confusion, Bugs Bunny Crazy Castle was given a North American and European release on the Game Boy in 1990. 3 different main characters, but ultimately the same game. Whatever you know it by, the game involves Bugs Bunny, or Mickey, wandering around various floors collecting carrots, or keys, while trying to avoid the Rascals, which include Wile E. Coyote, Sylvester, and Daffy Duck. I seem to recall Elmer Fudd being Bugs Bunny's nemesis, but he doesn't appear. What do I know? Anyway, once you collect all the carrots, you move to the next floor. There are a lot of floors in this castle, and the variation isn't the greatest, but thankfully there's a password given to you after each stage, so you don't have to slog through the whole thing. The manual proudly points out that Bugs is an agile character. He can even survive jumps from high places. He's a bunny who can't jump. You get trapped in a corner, you're wabbit stew. The pace of the game is thankfully decent. Movement is fluid and responsive, and Bugs moves at a reasonable speed. You can fly through the levels, and each time you beat one, you get an extra life. Even if it is terribly repetitive, Crazy Castle is a surprisingly polished game for so early on. It wasn't quite a launch title, but any game released in the 80s that plays quite as nice as this can be praised. I don't think that justifies the 300 sequels it got, though.
world trusts Motocross Maniacs for Nintendo's Game Boy. With head-spinning loops and nitro turbo boosts, it's about to get you in its clutches.
Motocross Maniacs DMG-MX, developed and published by Konami. The first of many racing games was Motocross Maniacs, a time trial motorbike stunt game in the vein of Excitebike. Where that title had multiple races, this one is just a single competitor, although you can race a ghost bike of the time to beat. Where Excitebike was three-dimensional, the Game Boy version is on a single plane. Here, your aim is to take on each course over 2 laps before the timer runs out. Scattered across the route are various pickups that extend your time, tyre wear, and nitro boosts. The nitro is vital to getting through large parts of the tracks. There are loops and ramps aplenty, and your success or failure is determined by both your landing angle and how well you preserve the amount of nitro you have. If you run out, you may as well give up because you're not getting back in time, and there are some jumps that you simply can't pass without the nitro. The problem therein being that there's no automatic restart, you have to wait for that timer to drop, so go for those pickups. You can also collect top speed boosts, but you lose these if you come off your bike. Hopefully, if you're a Game Boy fanatic, you can excuse poor graphics. Motocross Maniacs isn't a pretty game. The whole visage is a bland, unappealing hodgepodge of platforms, floating in the ether of what looks like the loading program of the Matrix, white as far as you can see. When going up an incline, your bike floats a foot from the track, which seems like it would have been a perfectly easy fix that testing should have brought up. The music is pretty cool though, it serves as a good backdrop for a racing game, and the engine and boost sounds use the sound chip very effectively, so kudos there. Getting to grips with how the bike controls takes a while to get used to, but it's quite fun if you give it time. My word though, those time limits get really cruel after a while, to the point where you cannot afford to fall or miss a single time boost. There's a strange trick if you have a lot of nitro where you rapidly press the B button and you're propelled rocket-like in whatever direction your bike is facing. It's very useful if you're running out of time towards the end. Either the gravity is a little strange or the air is really thick, because you slow down mid-jump in a way that doesn't feel Newtonian. It's a fun game, despite looking half-finished and half-tested. You probably won't beat this, but if you do, then believe me, you've truly earned that ending. Which is a shame, because there isn't one. Thanks for listening to the Portable Power Podcast. If you want to support the show, the best way to do so is on Patreon at patreon.com/portablepowerpodcast. Or subscribe on the YouTubes. We have daily uploads Monday to Friday, where you can watch me suck at the games as I talk about them. You can tweet me at POCubed or on any of the other socials you might expect. Thanks again and have a great weekend.